So, City Light, I'm here with Gino, and we are excited to have him here. We're going to discuss for a while tonight, and then I'll just edit out the good parts and show them to you. Gino, start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, because most people in our church, I have shared some of your content over the past 6 months
Okay.
with our church over email, but I don't know who all watches what that I send out. So yeah, introduce yourself for us real quick if you don't mind.
So I'm Gino Allison. My wife Shannon and I pastor the South Suburban Vineyard Church here in the South suburbs of Chicago. We are about 45 minutes south of the Loop. We have 4 boys, and we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary as church planters here in the South suburbs. I grew up on the South side of Chicago in a really homogeneous area. I tell people all the time, our entire social network was exclusively Black churches, schools, friends, everything. And that all changed for me when I went to go to school at the University of Illinois. And the Lord just rocked my world. It introduced me to the vineyard and really planted within me a desire, a passion really to see the church not be so divided, all right? And so our heart all those years ago was to start a vineyard church. That was baked into the core of it was a desire to have different kinds of people worship together. So we thought maybe we can do this. We tried it, and here we are 10 years later, living the dream.
Living the dream of online church.
All right, living the dream of online church, not able to use the building we just bought.
Just how you planned it.
Exactly how we drew it up.
Well, Gino, I've heard you speak in person and also online multiple times on, diversity in the church, multiculturalism, anti-racism, and I've sought you out personally just in the last month or so, and I have appreciated your wisdom. I think it'd be a good place to start, just to talk a little bit about, about your passion for that, why you have a passion for it, what motivates you to kind of put yourself out there like you do.
Well, like I said a few moments ago, it started for me being in this, what I felt like is a really awkward situation as this Black kid from the city on the super white campus of the University of Illinois back in '99 when I went there to school. It was a real culture shock for me because, like I said, I was used to just only being around Black people in that social environment. And so I was forced to try to navigate a different social setting. But one of the greatest gifts that God gave me in the midst of that awkwardness was He gave me some friends. I joined InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And through that experience, God gave me some close friends. And what He did through those friendships was He taught me to value difference, not just tolerate difference, but to value difference. And being in that environment and interacting with those people helped me to see some things about how I viewed the world and how I viewed other people, particularly people who were different than me. And the Lord just really did a transforming work in my heart. 2 years into my time at the university, a friend of mine invited me to the vineyard. And I went to the vineyard. It's a super white church. And by that time, I was more comfortable in white settings. But the Lord met me there. I was just at a time in my life where the Lord really ministered to me through the people there and through the music. And so I fell in like with the vineyard, but still was very, very dissatisfied with how much it cost me to be in that space. How much I would say my cultural needs weren't getting met in a place where I spent a lot of time and gave a lot of myself. And so I think that discontentment birthed a desire to see if maybe this philosophy of ministry, this movement, had space for a church that was intentionally multicultural, multi-ethnic. And when we were given the blank canvas to start our own church, we said, "Hey, I think we can make this happen." And so what we have been able to experience in our local church and learn in our local church, I long to see break out in the vineyard. And as I've had an opportunity to steward leadership and and given voice to speak to the movement, the broader movement, we've seen the Lord do some really, really good things in the various different realms, whether it be vineyard worship, whether it be in just educating and turning the volume up on this discussion. And so the passion for me and the calling, I would say, started as a student at the University of Illinois. It grew as I come to fall in love with the vineyard and realize that we have done some great work, but there's a whole lot more to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like this isn't on the list of questions I sent you, sorry. Do you feel like, so you're 10 years in with the church plant, do you feel like I know no church planter, no pastor, no leader ever feels like they've arrived or like achieved what they, set out to achieve, but do you feel like you're walking in some of those dreams that you had in your church?
Absolutely, man. I told somebody recently that when I stand up to preach, I mean, now I'm sitting down to preach and look at a camera, but when I stand up to preach, I see what I saw in my mind. I see the vision that God gave me. Literally a room full of different people of different ages, different genders, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different ethnicities. And the Lord just showed me that this is really possible. Now, it's not been easy. It certainly hasn't been easy. And it's most challenging when we sit in a political climate like we sit, because if you have true diversity, you've got worldview diversity, you've got political diversity, and you see all these flare-ups when you have moments like police shootings and so to me, that's good trouble, though. That's like that's part of being a reconciling community. And so, yes, in many ways, I see what I saw when I look out to but like any church on mission, we've got work to do. We've got still a long way to go.
Yeah.
So,
but that's awesome that you are seeing it. I mean, because I think there's some people that would say that that's almost impossible to see happen, maybe even especially in churches. And so
there's a lot that has to go right. I mean, it's very.
I'm sure you've been extremely intentional to make it.
You don't stumble into what we have.
Right. Yeah.
I can testify to that.
Okay. Well, so what we're trying to do, and I've to the people listening at City Light, I've briefed Gino on all that we've done the past few 4 weeks. So we want to lean into this. How do we start to talk about hard issues, and especially how do we speak up when we feel the need to speak up? How do we do so in a way that's Christ-like? And so, the first question I have for you, Gino, is I think that there's a lot of people who are passionate right now in this moment in our country about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned politics, you mentioned race. There's things about, the pandemic that people are very passionate about, and so on. And, something that's been personally concerning for me and that we've talked about as a church is that, some of our interactions online and some of our interactions in person as Christians I think they've lacked the hallmark, of Christianity, which is that brotherly love. And so I just want to ask you, like, how can we speak up about issues we feel are like super, super important without damaging relationships with believers who disagree with us? I'm sure that you've dealt with that in your time. And so do you have any wisdom, any advice or thoughts for us on that?
Yeah, I think, I don't know that we can totally control how somebody perceives or receives the things that we say. I think it's kind of crazy to assume that we have that kind of control. That is also to say, I think it's kind of crazy to assume that we can totally control how somebody receives something or, whether or not they take offense. Mm-hmm. In fact, the only way to ensure that you don't do that is that you say absolutely nothing. And even these days, saying absolutely nothing will get you in trouble too. So
yes.
What do you do? But Christian, we are both preachers, right? I think if we are healthy in our approach, we know that while we try to be persuasive as preachers, it is not our job to persuade people or make sure that people are persuaded. While we hope that we are convincing because we carry good news and truth, it is not our jobs to convince people to follow Jesus or anything. It's just not our job. And so our job is to present righteous truth, seasoned with as much grace as we can shake out over it. And we trust the Holy Spirit to do the heavy lifting, to do the work. And so I think that the trouble comes in when I feel like it's my job to make you see things the way that I see them. Mm-hmm. It's my job to force you or shame you or guilt you or, use my conversational skills and my intellect and my knowledge or my wokeness to bludgeon you into thinking differently. Nobody has ever been won over by being shamed or by being beat up online or being slandered or whatever. No, that's not the way we do it. And so the way I think that we can do the least amount of harm is that we are faithfully speaking truth, sharing what's right, and trying to do so in the most winsome way possible. I think what's missing, Christian, and I don't know if you agree with me, is winsomeness. I think what distinguishes healthy communication from unhealthy communication, even if it's truth, is a winsomeness. Jesus was trying to win the world. He was trying to show people a more excellent way. And sadly, what's missing from a lot of the discourse is that winsomeness, because I think anybody can get amens from the choir. Anybody could, rev up the already convinced, but it takes some real skill and thoughtfulness and careful speaking and thinking to enlighten folks who aren't already convinced. And so that's where I tend to lean. I put a lot of thought and energy into thinking about how to plate something in a way that somebody who disagrees with me might go, I never thought of it that way. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And trust me,
yeah.
You follow me on social media. I probably offend lots of people, but it's usually not the way I said it or my tone or something else. It's usually them just being at odds with what I said, not necessarily how I said it or dishonor or disrespect. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I love how you're saying that was a winsomeness to Jesus. It's a hard word for me to say. Mm-hmm. And that can be something that's lacking in our communication there. You called yourself, when we were talking on the phone recently, a bridge builder. And that really stuck with me. I think that goes along with your winsomeness. Like you say thinking about how to how can I forget how you said it when we were talking on the phone, but something about, how can I get to where you are and kind of bring you back with me, so to speak. I thought that was really wise.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You can say it. Yeah.
Well, I imagine a bridge person is not usually the person walking somebody over the bridge, but I imagine the bridge person laying over two land masses and being walked on. Right? I'm helping walk on me across, and
yeah.
Again, this is not an invitation to be stepped on, but it is a humble hat to wear, if I could paint that picture, because it seeks to lay down all sorts of things, because most people are ignorant about something. They're not seeing something really, really important. And what I'm in touch with that calms me when I want to just shake somebody is that I remember how ignorant I was before the Lord dropped me into people that I never had the privilege of being around.
Right.
I remember how sure I was of certain things. I remember how you couldn't tell me different. I remember how sure I was, and I also remember how wrong I was. And I remember all the realms of my life where people took time to sit with me and they listened to me say dumb things. And after I would speak, then they would speak, and they would just suffer along with me. And so I keep that in mind a lot as I'm working in this realm, because we're just stupid about things until somebody like shows us the way. But nobody argued me toward enlightenment. Nobody like shamed me toward enlightenment, right? Somebody laid down their right to be right, so that they might show me a more excellent way. And because of that, I feel like that's how I learned things. That's how I saw things that I didn't see. And I am this thoroughly convinced that that is the way that you bring people into the light, is that you suffer along with them, right? You treat them like a human.
That's so good, Gino.
Mm.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, we could just end right there, honestly. I feel like I need to go take that and work on it for a while. Then we'll come back and have part two.
True, man.
Okay. I was talking recently in one of the last teachings about, there's repeated commands in the Bible about speaking up for the oppressed, and that's a side of Christianity for me that I feel like I'm in discovery about, it's been a process. I feel like it's been a process of like 10 years, like learning about the place of social justice and where's my voice and what thing can I speak into and what things can I, it's like you can't speak into all things.
Right.
And so, I think some of us struggle with knowing like where the line is between, am I speaking up enough, or am I speaking up so much that I've like lost my audience, like alienated the very people I'm trying to influence. Like, I don't know that the question's coming out as well as it sounded when I wrote it, but like how do you walk that line and know when it's time for you to speak up? And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question, man. I would say that I speak up when I have something to say or when something needs to be said. Now let me go a little bit deeper with that.
I like that though. I think that's a tweetable right there. So,
well, if everything's a thing, then nothing's a thing, right?
Oh man, yeah.
And so there are people who just drone on about everything. Everything is urgent. Everything is stop the presses. And if everything is urgent, nothing's urgent. If everything's pressing, and as leaders, we really need to realize that we could really devalue our voice if we're misusing it. And so a lot of well-meaning people with good hearts and good motives are just saying too much and hopping all over the place with the wrong tone, with the wrong disposition, and to your point, aren't as effective as they perhaps could be, right? But at the same time, there are people who are accusing somebody of talking too much just because they've been indicted by that truth, right?
Right.
So
right,
there
right.
is it matters who's accusing, and some people don't want to hear anything about racism, anything about inequality, anything about police shootings and systematic, like anything is too much for them. Those people are incredible. I'm not particularly moved by that, right? The average person, I was just talking from a leadership perspective.
Yeah.
But for the average person, I think that person has to be governed by a strong internal sense of whether or not their silence is a result of fear of not wanting to step into the fray, fear of what your family are going to say and what your friends are going to think if you come out swinging for this particular cause or that particular person or that particular injustice. If the silence is motivated by fear, I think that's worth checking out, because I think we're called to use our voice to influence those in our sphere of influence. We are called to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, to be a voice that pushes back against hate and pushes back against bigotry and racism. We're called as kingdom people to do that. And so I would say if a person is always tweeting, always on social media about everything, but silent when injustice happens, to me, that's a red flag because, you know, but I know people who are rarely, I mean, they get on social media once a year, they tweet 3 times a year. And so it's not abnormal for them to be silent because they're
Right.
just kind of silent. But for people, there are people listening to this that know that they have been wrestling inwardly with whether or not to say something. And that wrestling is a result of fear of being misunderstood or fear of being jumped on, and they don't want to jump into the fray. I think the Lord might challenge us to wrestle with that because there is a responsibility, I think, that believers have to speak righteous truth and push back against darkness. That's my personal opinion.
Well, that's why we have you on. We value your personal opinion. And I think it's rooted in scripture. You know, I don't think that you're grasping at straws there. You know, Gina, it's just like it's hard for me to know. It's I guess this is just restating what I've already said, but it's hard for me to know those moments. And some of that you're saying is check your internal, you know, see what your motivations are. You know, I do have a fear of being vocal at the wrong times, and I have a fear of being silent at the wrong times. And so, you know, I think that just for me, just sharing, and I'm sure other people in the church would share this, like there is a fear there. I don't want to be silent. I think one of the things I've tried to use as a barometer is, do I have brothers and sisters, specifically if we're talking about racism, brothers and sisters who, you know, of color, who for me to either say or not say something would damage my relationship with them or hurt them in some way personally. For me, and I don't know, I mean, you can correct me on this, please, but it helps me to make it more about like people I actually know than about like, I need to say something global here. But I that could just be me.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that's legit. But I think if we go back to the winsomeness thing, if we go back to the people of God are supposed to be the most thoughtful people on the planet, particularly as it relates to their words, because the power of life and death are in our words, right?
Yeah.
Or if that was being written today, in our tweets, in our stat updates, right? And so if you look at my social media presence, I can talk about just about anything I want to talk about, the most controversial things, but I'm just aware of how I say it. I'm not a police officer, and so I don't know all the ins and outs. I got officers in my church that I regularly process things with. I mean, I spent the whole past 2 weeks texting back and forth with a white officer in our church who sees things very differently. I mean, I say, help me understand this. 7 shots. Is there any way that this could have not happened? So I'm constantly speaking, and oftentimes you'll see something like, man, this seems really unjust to me. Man, I pray that justice is served in this. Now, some people, if they're just reading that fast, if they're looking for a fight, they will hear me making a judgment. They will hear me. But if you read what I said, I reflected on how I'm feeling about it. You can't argue with me about how I'm feeling about it. This seems unjust.
Right.
This seems like it could have ended a different way. Praying for justice to be right.
So you're kind of showing that you're processing it too. You're almost being vulnerable.
Sure, and I'm being honest. I'm not hiding the fact that this feels off to me.
Right.
This feels unjust. This feels like if this guy were white, he would survive this encounter. I don't have to hide that, but I'm not acting like I know for a fact that it was a bad shooting. Now, some of them, the videos, there's no question about it. And when there's no question about it, I don't feel like I need to, hedge my words. But I'm saying most of the time, there's tons of information that I don't have, but I am just modeling, just sharing my reflections, grieving out loud, lamenting out loud, which basically gives people the permission to do that, and to show them how to do that in a constructive way. Now, if somebody who's a friend of mine gets upset with me saying, hey, this feels unjust, I don't even know what to say to that person. Like, what right do you have to tell me that I can't use on my Facebook account.
Right.
As thoughtful as I am about even the punctuations I use,
Right.
as a black man in America, who are you to tell me that I can't get on and say, man, this feels wrong. I pray that justice is served.
And sometimes it doesn't matter how, I mean, this is the other side of what you were saying earlier. It doesn't matter how winsome you are.
Sure.
People are going to find fault with what you say.
But in the end, that's not the guy who I'm talking to anyway.
Right.
I'm talking to a guy like you,
Mm-hmm.
who is needing some help framing this. I'm talking to a black brother or sister who is trying to figure out how to themselves say, I mean, if I had $1 for every time somebody said, man, Gino, this is exactly how I'm feeling. Thank you for putting this into the words, right? And so
Yeah.
I realized that you and I are discipling our people as to how to engage on social media, how to speak truth and not hide in these big, important moments, but also to do so in an honest but winsome way. And we might be controversial. We're not called to not be controversial. We're called to not be unduly controversial,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because our job sometimes is to provoke and to stir and to shake, right? And so when you don't show up in that way as a leader, as an influencer, and I'm not just talking to people who are pastors, I'm saying we all influence somebody if it's just our kids, right?
Right. Right.
We are called to step up and to speak up. And I think the safest, most honest way to do that is to humbly present how you're wrestling with it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other times where I just have to kind of go be bolder and on record and just be more controversial, but that's not the goal. Like the
Right.
issue might be controversial, the topic or the event or the circumstance, and I don't shy away from that. But the goal is, of course, to be not unduly controversial.
Right. Let the truth that you're speaking be what is stirring, not the attitude or the extra verbiage or the, emotion behind it. I mean, not emotion,
No,
but like the negative emotion.
Sure.
Right.
But at the same time, you had to understand that if you're trying to go around and manage how everybody's receiving that, good luck.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got a set of lenses.
Are you trying to tell me I can't please everybody?
You can't, and you shouldn't.
Gino, this is turning into a counseling appointment.
Hey, if you want to please everybody, go sell ice cream. Don't be a pastor, man.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And you still don't have the flavor that somebody wants.
No, you'll have lactose intolerant people, and they'll just be so angry at me. Like, why are you selling ice cream?
Exactly. Oh my goodness. So yeah, you can't control all that.
We might be up at the time limit, so this one might not make it through. But I want to ask it because I haven't totally got a handle on how long we've been going. This is kind of I'm interested in what you think about this. This is kind of the reverse of what we've been talking about, but it is about social media. So for some people, as they scroll through social media, they have a hard time knowing when they should speak up on other people's stuff. Okay, so like it can feel like if I see so and so say something or share something, if I don't interject, then I'm somehow in tacit agreement with what they're saying. And so what's the line between being like social media police and also feeling like that burden to not like be in tacit agreement?
Yeah, I don't think it's anybody's job to be the social media police. I will be an honest, unedited mirror for my family and for my staff, for my key leaders, because they know that they represent us online, and the hard work that we've done to establish a reputation of diversity and love for all people can be undone by tweet. Years of reputation building and hard work, if it's the right staff member, can be undone in a post. And so I don't mind being the social media police for those people because they work for me and they represent what we've been building. That makes sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I feel responsible to be an honest mirror to my family, like my siblings and my mother, because we'll regularly hit somebody on the text and say, "Hey, did you mean to post that? Because this is how it came off," you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But for other people, these days, I am rarely responding on somebody else's thread, particularly if I disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be really, really egregious. If I feel moved to say something to them, it's probably going to be through a text, or I probably just end up not blocking people, but unfollowing people, because there's a lot of people that I love better when I don't see what they post. No, it's just, I love a lot of
That's a
people. I
great
got some
statement.
family members that I love them more deeply when
Yeah.
I don't see their social media posts. And so, all to say, I think in some ways it diminishes my voice when I'm chasing all of these things. It dilutes my voice because I want to use my voice when it's important, when it matters,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't want to be this clanging cymbal that's going around policing, and we all know people like that, right? There's nothing special about their voice. But there's some of us who go, hey, if Christian is tweeting about this, I'm going to read this. He speaks up when it's important. Let me pay attention, right? And so if you're chasing every thread, right? But I also know that some people feel personally called. And I think there are some people in my life who do this really, really well, and they do it really, really winsomely, and there's lots of honor and thoughtfulness into their replies. They are called to be those who are just who press back against certain forms of ignorance, and there's an anointing on them to do that. There's a calling. They have the grace. They don't lose their cool. They never slip out of that, that kingdom mindset. And so I think that there's a small sliver of people who are called to do that, but many of us are not. I feel like I'm called to play offense and not defense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to put my credibility and my influence and my reputation toward, like, being a voice that helps to move people in the right direction and helps people be thoughtful about things that they hadn't considered, rather than going around checking people in the comment section. I don't think that's what most of us aren't called to do that.
Right.
Yeah. And your silence doesn't mean agreement. Like if one of your friends posts something stupid, just because you didn't check them in the comments, only an unreasonable person would assume that you agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like I like what you said. Something you're a mirror. So you're a mirror to the people close to you.
Mm-hmm.
And often that's not done in public anyway.
Usually not, no.
Yeah. So, and that's good. And we all need that. Like, I mean, I want people who are close to me to be a mirror to me. I think that's something that we all need. That's a good way to put it. Do you know any closing thoughts?